Good morning, Mary. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and your willingness to share your journey in becoming a nurse infection preventist. So I have a few questions for you, and I'd like you to start by just introducing yourself and sharing your journey to your specialty.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I'm really excited to share with you. My name is Mary Curtin Pierce. I've been a nurse for just about 20 years. I started my schooling in Boston, just outside of Boston at Regis College. And I had always worked in trauma services, critical care. And in 2016, I was by a hospital-acquired infection personally. I had gone into the hospital for just a routine situation and had come out with an infection that left me in septic shock. And it was about a year-long recovery. After I experienced that, I realized that there is a large practice gap between this generational change that seems to be evolving in nursing. So we go from the Florence Nightingale days where we're fluffing pillows and, yes, doctor, and all of those sorts of things, where we're just an art into this we're morphing and changing into this thing that is more of a science now, I feel like. And we're trying really hard to turn this profession into a science. And there has to be this gap between it where there is, where both things are collaborating together. And when I went through this experience, being on the other side of the call bell, I call it, is where I learned that it was so important that I was both a scientist and a nurse with a bedside manner that could keep my patient in their need. And so after I recovered from that experience, I went on a journey. I gave up trauma and critical care nursing, and I became an infection preventionist. And so, obviously, for those of you who might not know, an infection preventionist specializes in studying hospital epidemiology, prevention of hospital-acquired infections, or sometimes we hear them called HACs, hospital-acquired conditions. So we work with reporting agencies like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the state, and we work a lot with infectious disease specialists and the frontline nursing teams. And so there I felt like I could start to give back to those patients and the nurses in a way that was meaningful, that would not only help prevent infections that I experienced, because as we all know, some of the last data that was released by Centers for Disease Control says that 1.7 million people are affected by hospital-acquired infections each year, and 99,000 of those end up in a coffin. And so I felt like I could really give back to both of those parties and bridge this divide. And while, I'm only one person in a small hospital, I feel as though I'm doing something meaningful with my profession and my science and my life.
Thank you so much. That was really an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing that. The next question is, why is this specialty such a good fit for you? And you maybe answered this a little bit already, but how did you decide it was a good fit? And then what is challenging about this specialty?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't know if it was a good fit at first. It was really a foreign sort of field to me as trauma and critical care. But I jumped with both feet into the water. And I learned as I, went on that I belonged there. It felt good to go to work. It felt good at the end of the day. I knew I had done something meaningful. I think it sort of just, it was a chance I took, honestly. It was really outside of my initial goals in nursing, but it felt like a worthy chance, So I wish there was something more magical than that, but it really it really was just a chance that I took, and it worked. I think that's an important part of nursing. There's so many things for us to do in nursing, and the more chance we take, the better we will have an opportunity to find something that truly affects people in a way, and our patients in a way, and our communities in a way that's meaningful. One of the things I find really challenging, or have found challenging, is, there's a lot of, in healthcare, there's still a cultural change going on with in the acceptance of evidence-based practices sometimes in just cultures. And so I find that when we're approaching a topic that is difficult to change, that has a lot to do with cultural shifts or changes in practice, that there's a lot of resistance in healthcare, whether it be from providers or nursing itself, or all the other parts that make care work. And so I find that part challenging, but it's a good challenge because it teaches me too, as I go through the experience. Every day I learn something from the people that I'm working with that affect. And there are days that it's extremely disheartening, but it's one of those jobs you have to decide, leave the meeting maybe feeling defeated in that moment, but you got to get up, go back to the drawing board, and figure out a different way to approach the topic, because what you're doing is important.
Excellent. I love so many of the things that you said. I know in my experience with mentoring younger nurses, we all come out of the gate with what we think we're going to love to do. And what's amazing and incredible about nursing is that there's such a variety and there's so many opportunities. And as you grow and change as a person, those opportunities may look a little bit different. So I love how you talked about being open-minded to those possibilities. And I think that's really key in nursing is we're blessed that we have so many options, and really you should never, when you get to the point where you're bored and you feel like you've kind of done what you can in that particular area, it's a great time to move on.
And I think too, it's super important to impart on the generations coming up that following is as important as leading, right? So there's a place for all of us, and sometimes, and not sometimes, we absolutely need followers as much as we need leaders, and we need good followers, we need good leaders in this profession. And it's okay if you want to stay a bedside nurse forever, because we do. So I hear this message a lot, and totally important things. So what about that person who just wants to stay there and take care of that? And those people are unequivocally important in our profession. So it's okay to take chances, but it's okay to love what you're doing bedside too.
Awesome. Thank you. So I imagine that your role has been really challenged with COVID-19. Are there any particular aspects of that you could share with the group?
Yeah, COVID-19 has been, it's been quite a year going. I think what I do in my field, working in hospital epidemiology, we work so much with evidence-based practices and scientific evidence as to how to improve our practices or practice in general. And COVID-19 presented a challenge, I should call it, in that everything was evolving so fast, still is, and we were learning so much so fast. 1 minute we're like, you need to wear a mask unless you're sick, and then the next minute everybody's in a mask. Everyone, so we're trying to keep up with Center for Disease Control and their recommendations, right? Because it's part of our governing body in infectious disease and infection prevention. And one of the challenges when you're doing what we do in infection prevention, you're asking your frontline to trust you, right? So, trust me, I'm telling you the right thing to do. It's based on science. It's based on evidence. Please just follow the guidance. And when you're changing that recommendation day to day, sometimes in the same day, you'll learn something completely different than you just, sent out a memo or did speech with folks, and then you got to come in and say something completely different.
That's really an amazing kind of enlightenment, it sounds like, that you have come to, is really the importance of trust as that's probably one of the most important skills or characteristics, it sounds like, that you have in your role. So that's really interesting. I want it maybe would have not have been so evident if it weren't for what we experienced with COVID-19 and the constant changes that we had to take. So last question. What advice would you give for a new grad who's interested in a specialty, and in particular, like if you want to just hit the high points on certifications or trainings that might be helpful?
Absolutely. So infection prevention is after our society that we belong to is called APIC, APIC. So excuse me, you can hit that online. In that, in their website, they have great educational resources that I found really interesting and helpful when I was making decisions to go into this field. They have a really great supportive electronic education system so you can learn the foundations of the job. We are all certified infection control. So we have a CIC that's a test that you take about 2 years after practice. It's like the boards for infection control and epidemiology. I think, too, one of the biggest advice, besides all of those things that you can do to research the things about infection prevention, for example, on your own, is to find someone in a role that you have an interest in and go ask questions, right? Don't be shy. Come knock on the door, say, do you have time to meet with me later, now, whatever? I'd love to pick your brain. Don't be afraid, right? All of us have been where you are at one point or another. And I think mentorship is imperative in nursing role.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thanks for sharing your expertise with us today and also for your contribution to nursing. It sounds like your team is really very lucky to have you.
Thank you so much. Nice to talk with you.